So hopefully you found that interesting and, a nice little replication of a very old study. I mean, it's not like the ratings went from, 1 to 10. They just got more favorable after a workout, right? Then they were very neutral before the workout and they became leaning towards attractive after the workout. So there we go. All right. So now let's talk about some theories of love. And it's really important for us to remember that we use the word love in psychology to refer to anything ranging from just complete friendship, platonic friendship, all the way up to and including romantic relationships. So you're going to see some of your friendships described in these models just as much as you're going to potentially see your romantic relationships described. So, all right. Let's start with Sternberg's triangular theory of love. So he said that there were 3 components to love: intimacy, passion, and commitment. And that they can appear in different combinations, alone or in different combinations, to produce different kinds of love. So first off, if all of them are absent, he calls that non-love. And I guess that's probably what you feel towards the complete and total stranger who, checked you out at the grocery store and you never see them again and you've never seen them before. I'm going to guess you don't have intimacy, passion, or commitment for that person. So I don't know. I guess maybe you might have passion if you think they're really attractive, but let's assume that you don't. And let's move on to other kinds of love. So what we're going to see is different kinds of love being present with different combinations of these individual components. So first off, if all you have is intimacy, he labeled that liking. So if the only component of love that's there is, sharing your deepest thoughts, talking about your past, talking about your goals for the future, that kind of sounds like what you do with friends. At least that's what women typically do with friends. The men in the group may not talk as much about that with their male friends, with their same-sex friends, as the female students probably do with their female friends. But it's pretty characteristic of just standard friendship or liking a person, is that, you've gotten to know them a little bit. They've shared some of their likes and dislikes, those kinds of things. And so you're really starting to find out whether you actually like the person. If all you have is commitment, Sternberg called this empty love. So if you have a person who is committed, they're married, or they've made a proclamation before all of their friends and loved ones that this is my person. It could be a romantic partner, right? And so maybe there's been a marriage relationship. Maybe it's a friend, and the declaration is this is my best friend. This is my ride or die friend, something like that. So it doesn't have to be a legal commitment. It has to be a commitment that other people besides you and just that one person know about, right? Like everybody else regards you as you two are clearly best friends. Like none of us think we're your best friend because we know that you two are it. That would count, right, as a commitment. Now, typically best friends are more than just a commitment, right? But I'm just trying to define what a commitment is for you. So really there are 2 ways that you can imagine entering into a empty love. One is through the traditional arranged marriage, or the modern arranged marriage in what we like to call married at first sight, which if you haven't been watching it, it's awesome. Yeah, for those of us who teach human sexuality and, social psychology, it's awesome to watch this experiment. It's got a professor from the University of Washington. Her name is Dr. Pepper Schwartz, and she's a sociologist. She's one of the experts who helps to match candidates together to get married. At the altar is when they meet. And they're supposed to, with the support of these relationship experts. So, we have a sexologist. She's a marriage family therapist, but her specialty is sexology. And so she helps them to navigate the passionate part of their relationship. And then there's Pastor Cal, who helps them to navigate their intimacy part of their relationship, where they get to know each other and stuff. But they start off in empty love. They've never met each other in their lives. So there's that way to enter into empty love. And then there's the other direction, where maybe at one point you had intimacy and or you had passion combined with this commitment. So you had started off with a different kind of love, and those things got lost. And so now you're left with just the commitment that you made. And so you have empty love. And I can't emphasize too strongly that this can happen with friendships, right? Like you can have a friendship where you've got all sorts of intimacy. You guys really feel like you get each other. You're really on the same page. And then that starts to fall apart. And now all you're left with is, we always said we were friends, or everybody knows we're best friends. And so now you're left with this commitment to each other, but none of the benefits that had been part of that relationship earlier. So you can enter into empty love from any combination that includes commitment. And if you have, all you have left is that commitment, then you're in that sort of, why am I here kind of empty love. Now, if all you have is passion, this is what's called infatuation. And so you don't know the person, right? You don't have intimacy. You don't have a commitment with this person. Sometimes because you've never met the person, because how many of us have had infatuations for famous people, right? You got all this passion, and if only they ever met us, you get a lot of that, phantom other, where it's like, if they got to meet us, they would love us too, right? And then of course we assume all these qualities about them because, we know just enough to think we know them, right? And so like any obsession that you might have had when you were younger might have fallen into that passion. We can have that kind of infatuation for people who, we go to school with and stuff, but that just, we never have the opportunity to really know them or to, really get committed to them or whatever. So passion alone is called infatuation. Now it's time to start combining the different types. So if you combine intimacy with commitment, then we call that companionate love. And I've been calling it best friend love, right? Because this is the kind of, we have this intimate bond with the person, and we have made some degree of commitment, either, professing, you're my best friend, I will never let you down, all these kinds of things, and all of our friends know it, or maybe you've gotten married or something like that. Typically, a couple that's getting married doesn't start off in companionate love, right? Usually you have all three things present on on a wedding day. Whereas with best friends, it builds to companionate love. And that's probably where it stops, right? Is at companionate love. In romantic relationships, when you're in companionate love, it could be dissatisfying, right? Because you're missing the passion that you would expect to be present in a romantic relationship. Or it could be completely satisfying because for whatever reason, the partners are not that driven by the passion. And so, living in this best friend kind of situation is perfectly fine. So it can be satisfying or dissatisfying to be in a romantic relationship that doesn't, involve the passion part. Now let's go to passion. Okay, so if we combine intimacy and passion, now we're talking about our traditional view of what romantic love would be like, right? Where you have these long conversations where you're sharing all your hopes and dreams, and you talk about things all the time, and you fall asleep on the phone because you just don't ever want, no, you hang up. You have that kind of going on, combined with this passion, whether it's fulfilled or not, just this, a lot of times people label it chemistry, right? Not to sell Married at First Sight too hard, but a lot of times couples will on the altar feel that infatuation right away. They've got that passion. And so they may experience more than just empty love on their wedding night, as they're feeling some passion towards their newfound, husband or wife. So the idea with romantic love is that, a lot of us experience it like when we're dating. You feel all of this passion towards the person and all this attachment to them because of the intimate information that you share, the goals, the dreams, and all that stuff. Now, the last two component combination would be passion and commitment. And this is called fatuous love. And so this is where you're making a commitment, you feel passionate towards the person, but you really don't know them that well. The example I used to always give is, going to let's say one of your friends is running off to Vegas to get married, and you go to be, part of the bridal group. And while you're down there, you meet somebody who, either lives in Vegas or is visiting also, and you just have this whirlwind. Oh my gosh, we are just so passionate about each other. Let's impetuously get married. And now you're in fatuous love, right? Where you feel all this passion for each other and you've made this commitment now. Sometimes you end up in fatuous love as you started off in a relationship where all three components were present, but maybe the intimacy is kind of lacking right now in the relationship. And so but you still have passion for each other. So we would call that fatuous love also. The, pinnacle, the goal is to have all three things present at the same time. And that's what Sternberg called consummate love. It's like what we're all striving for in, marriages and things like that, is where we have intimacy with our partner, we feel passion with our partner, and we make that commitment to our partner. One of the things that Sternberg figured out after years of being married to his wife is that he did not really understand that what he thought was intimacy, which was sexual intimacy, is not what his wife thought was intimacy, which she thought was psychological intimacy. And so ultimately his marriage failed because he was being a little tone deaf towards his wife's needs. And I'm not telling stories out of turn. He told this story at a convention. And so I assume if you say the story in front of, 1,000 people, you don't mind if it gets repeated. So he said that, he's a big Harvard, he didn't say this part. He was a big Harvard researcher. He was really studying intelligence, and he had come up with a really innovative theory of intelligence. And so he was running all around the world giving speeches, and, he was just all sorts of hot shot. Everything's going great. It's great to be him right now. He'd come home and he would, have passionate reunion with his wife, and yet she's still dissatisfied. And he really couldn't understand what she was crying out for. He couldn't understand it. It wasn't until ultimately they did end up getting divorced that he finally, through help with other, therapists and stuff, helping him to figure it out, he's like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I didn't realize that what she was crying out for is that emotional intimacy. And I thought I was satisfying her emotional needs by, being physically expressive of my love, but never enough, wanting to hear about like what had been going on at the house while I was gone and these kinds of things. And so, so he developed this model to kind of explain what happened in his relationship. But I think even though it was designed to kind of describe his own personal experience, I feel like a lot of people can really relate to this idea of these different parts of love, and that they can wax and wane. And one of the things he really wants people to get from his, telling his experience and why he came up with this model is the idea that just because you're in consummate love doesn't mean you will always be in consummate love. And that you literally have to, like, the commitment will stay there, obviously, because it's legal and it's binding or whatever. So it's up to the partners to really work on maintaining intimacy and maintaining passion. And, we have to also be kind of gentle with ourselves, realizing that there are times in our lives when passion will be more likely, times in our life when intimacy will be more likely. One of the most difficult things for young couples is when they have children and they realize that their passion is not quite where it was before they had children. And so they start to think, is there something wrong with the relationship? Stuff like that. When what he really would like people to recognize is that there's sort of waves of stuff going on. And as long as you work towards coming back, having an absence briefly is not a sign that the relationship is doomed. The intractability, the refusal to go back and repair the thing that might be waning, that's where people get into trouble. And a lot of times in couples, especially heterosexual couples, but you can sometimes find it in homosexual couples as well. If one of them really feels like they can't express themselves sexually unless their intimate sort of psychological needs have been met, and the other one feels like they can't really bear themselves psychologically until they've had a passionate, sexual encounter with their partner, you can really be at an impasse where it's like, well, I don't feel emotionally valued by you enough to have sex with you, and I don't feel emotionally vulnerable enough with you until I have sex with you. So who's going to give in? Like, who's going to ultimately make sure that we get over this impasse? And see the phrasing I used? That's oftentimes how couples look at it. Who's going to give in? Who's going to not have their needs met so that ultimately the ball can get rolling, right? A lot of times the default, it's a little easier to do passion and then maybe the intimacy will come. But a lot of times people just sort of dig in their heels and they go, I'm not going to have passion until I feel like you value me as a person the way I need to be valued. And so you can really end up in a stalemate. So things to think about if you're ever, in that kind of situation, in a romantic situation, especially after the birth of children, people will oftentimes complain about, lack of passion. And then there's so much emotional energy going into the offspring that the parents start to feel like all intimate energies are going to the baby. There's no passion going on between the couple. And a lot of times there can be this moment where the couple's feeling like they're in an empty love. I just want to reassure you, I've had 2 children and I felt I felt like that, especially with the second one. It was even more taxing than when you had one. And the good news is if you're willing to work towards it, you can get back to the passion and the intimacy that ultimately reminds you why you found this person, so attractive and so desirable for you that you were willing to not only marry them or move in with them and have children with them. Like if you work at it, you can kind of remind yourself why we were there and what's going, why they were valuable in the beginning. And that can help you to get over these sort of impasses. All right, well, that covers Sternberg's theory and my advice. So in the next segment, we will go through Hendrick and Hendrick's love styles. So I will see you next.